This week, a 77-year-old military alliance worth trillions of dollars in collective security was put at risk by a single sentence, and the damage may already be irreversible. Because while the President of the United States openly threatened to annex the territory of a NATO ally, another leader quietly executed a move that rewires the balance of power in the Arctic and across Europe. This is not hyperbole. This is not media exaggeration. This is the most reckless diplomatic error since 1949, and it did not come from Moscow or Beijing. It came from Washington. As American credibility collapsed in real time, Canada did not panic. Canada did not issue empty statements. Canada positioned itself. On January 6, 2026, in Paris, while cameras were focused on Ukraine security talks, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a single announcement that sent shockwaves through every European capital. Canada is opening a new consulate in Greenland, backed by its Governor-General and Foreign Affairs Minister, within weeks. Let that sink in. While the United States threatened military force against Denmark, Canada built diplomatic infrastructure. While Washington reached for 19th century imperial logic, Ottawa played 21st century power. So here is the question that terrifies strategists in Brussels, Berlin, and Helsinki tonight. How did the United States manage to turn itself into the alliance risk while Canada became the partner everyone suddenly trusts? Because what happened in Paris was not a footnote, it was a turning point, and once trust breaks at this level, it does not come back. To understand why this moment matters, you have to strip away the personalities and look at the structural economics of power, because alliances do not collapse first through speeches, they collapse through risk repricing. Modern security and trade systems operate on one invisible assumption: predictability. Supply chains, defense procurement, energy flows, and Arctic infrastructure planning are built on timelines measured in decades, not election cycles. And the Arctic is not symbolic territory, it is hard infrastructure power. Over the next 20 years, Arctic shipping lanes are projected to handle trillions of dollars in trade as ice retreat accelerates. Greenland alone sits atop massive reserves of rare earth elements, uranium, and critical minerals that underpin batteries, defense systems, and advanced manufacturing. Europe depends on these inputs to reduce reliance on China. North America depends on them to maintain industrial sovereignty. This is where the economic logic turns brutal. Europe's Arctic strategy assumes allied stability. Insurance underwriting for Arctic shipping assumes NATO coherence. Long-term investment assumes no internal alliance threats. When the United States president refused to rule out military force against Denmark, every one of those assumptions shattered. Why? Because just-in-time supply chains do not tolerate geopolitical chaos. If even a 5% probability emerges that alliance commitments can fracture, insurers raise premiums, capital delays deployment, infrastructure financing pauses, the marginal cost of doing business explodes. This is not theoretical. European logistics firms already price Arctic routes based on political continuity scores. Defense planners model procurement contracts assuming collective defense certainty. Once Washington injected territorial aggression into the equation, the cost curve bent upward instantly. And here's the key contrast. Canada has spent years quietly investing in Arctic logistics, indigenous partnership frameworks, ice-capable fleets, satellite monitoring, and diplomatic presence. Not headlines, foundations. So when instability hit, Canada was already positioned upstream. That is why Canada's consulate announcement mattered economically, not symbolically. A consulate is not a flag, it is permitting power. It facilitates contracts, research cooperation, port access, mineral licensing, and security coordination. Europe noticed immediately. In one stroke, Canada offered what the United States suddenly could not: low-risk access. This is the iron law of economics. Capital flows toward reliability, not dominance. Washington threatened, Ottawa stabilized, and in global markets, stability is the most valuable commodity of all. Here is where Washington's mistake turns from diplomatic embarrassment into domestic economic damage. Because this was not just a foreign policy failure, it was a self-inflicted strategic wound. When the President of the United States threatens to seize territory from a NATO ally, markets do not debate ideology. They reprice risk immediately. Within hours of the Greenland remarks, European defense planners, Arctic logistics firms, and infrastructure investors began asking the same question. If Washington can threaten Denmark today, who is safe tomorrow? That uncertainty lands hardest not in Europe, but inside the United States. Start with energy and logistics. New York, Maine, Massachusetts, and Minnesota all depend on stable transatlantic shipping insurance and Arctic-adjacent trade corridors. When insurers reclassify routes as politically unstable, premiums spike. Those costs do not stay on balance sheets, they move directly into household prices. Shipping associations quietly warned that Arctic-linked freight contracts could face double-digit cost increases if alliance instability persists. That means higher heating costs in winter states, higher food prices, higher construction delays. And then there is defense. American defense contractors rely on joint procurement frameworks with European partners. Those frameworks assume political trust. When Danish leaders publicly state that NATO membership itself could be reconsidered under American aggression, procurement timelines freeze. Executives do not expand factories when alliance guarantees wobble. A senior aerospace supplier told Industry Press, off the record, that we cannot commit capital when the alliance leader is acting like a wild card. That hesitation translates into delayed hiring in Ohio, Texas, and Arizona. Tourism took a hit as well. Greenland-bound Arctic tourism routes, often operated by European firms using American insurers, began rerouting. Florida-based cruise operators flagged uncertainty around northern itineraries, citing unpredictable geopolitical conditions. Even agriculture felt tremors. Midwestern exporters rely on European stability to maintain predictable demand. When political chaos hits NATO, European buyers hedge. That means slower purchase orders for American grain and meat exports. This is the cruel irony. Trump framed his rhetoric as strength. In reality, it undermined the very system that keeps American businesses competitive. And here is the most damaging part. Once supply chain planners adapt away from American unpredictability, they don't snap back. They redesign permanently. Canada understood this. Washington ignored it. The result? American workers absorb the shock while Canada absorbs the opportunity. This is what backfire looks like. Not instantly dramatic, but structurally devastating. While Washington was generating chaos on television, Canada was quietly locking in the future. This is the part most American commentary completely missed. Canada did not react to the Greenland crisis. Canada anticipated it. For years, Ottawa has been executing a slow, disciplined Arctic strategy built around one core principle: infrastructure beats rhetoric. Rail, ports, ice-capable logistics, diplomatic presence, indigenous partnership frameworks, and regulatory predictability. So when trust in the United States fractured, Canada already had something ready to offer. Let us be precise about what happened next. First, diplomatic deployment. Sending the Governor-General and the Foreign Affairs Minister to Greenland was not ceremonial. It was a sovereignty signal. Canada was telling Denmark and Europe, we respect your borders, we invest, we do not threaten. That message landed immediately. Second, logistical realignment. Canada has spent the past decade upgrading Arctic-adjacent ports, expanding icebreaker capacity, and integrating northern routes into its national trade planning. This includes rail connectivity through Canada's western corridors and transatlantic access points that bypass American choke points entirely. In plain terms, Europe can reach the Arctic without touching United States political risk. Third, alliance diversification.
Mexico, quietly but decisively, has aligned itself with Canadian trade frameworks rather than Washington volatility. The European Union has accelerated exploratory agreements on critical minerals, research collaboration, and Arctic security dialogues with Ottawa, not Washington. This is not anti-American behavior. This is risk management. When one partner becomes unpredictable, rational actors diversify. Fourth, regulatory reliability. Canada's advantage is not raw power, it is process stability. Permits do not change overnight, contracts are honored, diplomacy is boring, and that is exactly why capital trusts it. European officials understand this. That is why leaders who once defaulted to Washington are now requesting side meetings with Ottawa. And finally, strategic patience. Canada did not declare itself a replacement for the United States. That would have triggered backlash. Instead, it simply showed up, with infrastructure, with respect, and with consistency. This is how influence actually grows, not through threats, through reliability. Washington tried to coerce. Canada offered certainty. And in 21st century geopolitics, certainty beats dominance every time. This is where the damage becomes permanent. Because geopolitics does not reset when a president leaves office. Trust, once broken, does not regenerate on a 4-year cycle. What happened between January 5th and January 6th, 2026 fundamentally altered how allies perceive United States reliability. For 77 years, NATO's deterrence rested on a single assumption, that the leader of the alliance would never become the source of threat. The moment that assumption collapsed, the alliance entered a new phase, one defined not by ideology, but by redundancy building. European capitals are now asking a question they had not seriously asked since 1949. Quote, "What happens if the United States cannot be counted on?" End quote. And once that question is asked, the answer cannot be unasked. Even if Trump exits the political stage tomorrow, the precedent remains. The lesson absorbed in Berlin, Copenhagen, Helsinki, and Paris is brutal and simple. American policy can turn imperial overnight. That means future risk assessments will always include a volatility premium for Washington. Meanwhile, Canada benefits from something far more powerful than influence: default trust status. And here is the geopolitical irony. The greatest beneficiaries of American incoherence are not Canada alone, they are Russia and China. When NATO unity fractures internally, Moscow does not need to fire a single missile. The deterrent weakens itself. When Washington uses the same territorial logic as Vladimir Putin, claiming security necessity to justify expansion, it erodes moral distinction. China sees this clearly. Beijing has spent decades arguing that Western rules are selectively applied. This week handed them a gift, proof that even the alliance leader abandons sovereignty norms when convenient. But here is the twist most analysts miss. Canada's rise actually limits Russian and Chinese gains. By offering Europe a stable North American partner that respects sovereignty, Canada plugs the vacuum before adversaries can fully exploit it. Canada is not replacing the United States militarily, but it is replacing it functionally in trust-based coordination. This is not the collapse of the West, it is the reconfiguration of leadership. And reconfigurations once underway rarely reverse. Power is not proven by how loudly a nation can threaten. Power is revealed by who others choose to stand with when uncertainty rises. This week in Paris, the United States tested that principle and failed. One leader reached for force, another built trust, and the alliance quietly took note. The opening of a Canadian consulate in Greenland will not dominate headlines, but historians will recognize it for what it is, the moment reliability replaced dominance as the currency of Western leadership. The United States did not lose influence because Canada challenged it. It lost influence because it abandoned predictability. Canada did not seize power, it inherited responsibility. And here is the uncomfortable question that now hangs over every NATO capital and over every American voter. If trust is the foundation of alliances, who destroyed it and who is now quietly rebuilding it? Because the future of Western cooperation will not be decided by threats, doctrines, or slogans, but by consistent action when it matters most. So ask yourself, when the next crisis hits, who do you think Europe will call first?